December 4th, 2013, speaking with David Jack, elected to the CHSSA Hall of Fame in 1994. And good morning, David.
Morning, Ron.
And we want to pick your brain just a little bit here and learn a little bit about you. Where did it all start?
In terms of coaching, or?
Oh, in terms of you.
Oh, I was born in Georgia.
Yeah, I knew that. And how long were you there? Did you come to California quickly?
No. I was born on an Army base and I was an Army brat for the first 5 years. So we didn't make it to California until I was 5.
Okay, and that was to?
Sacramento.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually I lived in Japan for almost 3 years.
When you were less than 5?
Yeah, 2 to 5. And then moved to Sacramento. My dad got transferred to the Sacramento Army base.
Okay.
Army Depot, whatever they called it. And that was fortuitous because that's where my mom's mother also lived, my grandmother. And that's where we stayed.
Okay, and that's where you went to high school?
High school through junior college.
What was your speech experience?
That's where, no speech in high school other than I never was afraid to get up in front of a classroom.
Okay, so you were the natural.
Yeah. In second grade, I had a teacher that didn't know what to do with me because they wouldn't allow me to skip a grade, my parents.
Right.
And so I was reading a 5th grade history book, and she would make me read a chapter, write whatever kind of report you could write in second grade, and then do a presentation on my chapter when I was in second grade. So I already started giving speeches.
Did you do any speaking competitively in junior college?
Yeah, no, that's where I got started.
That's where you started,
yeah. There was a woman named Donna Sparks.
I remember Donna, yes.
Yeah, she had taught at Grant High School, and she moved over to Cosumnes in its second year or third year open, and I was there. And I took her speech class because I wanted her to ask me out for the team. So I took a summer school course. And so starting my sophomore year in college, I got hooked. And at the same time that I was learning from her, I also was working at Luther Burbank High School a little bit helping, and over at Hiram Johnson because I was really involved in economics, and they had an economics debate topic on finance and education that year. And I was working with actually Doug Fraley.
Okay.
When he was a senior in high school with his case. Not so much coaching him as advising on the economics issues.
Okay. All right. And what were your areas of expertise? What did you like, at least when you started?
Initially, debate.
It was a debate.
Yeah, because then I moved on to San Francisco State. They had a less structured forensics program. And I moved into interp and unprepared events.
Okay.
But I was also really good at expository when I was in junior college. And that was one of the events that I would place in finals at major tournaments with and stuff like that.
And from Cosumnes, you ended up in college at?
San Francisco State.
San Francisco.
And that's where I graduated and did my student teaching. While I was at San Francisco State, though, I worked with the Lowell High School speech program.
Okay.
And that's kind of where, so I was always, I guess, a coaching even while I was becoming a better speaker.
Okay.
The nice thing about San Francisco State is that I had come out of a speed debate program where you spoke more quickly than probably you could be heard or understood or comprehended. And I got a woman named Nancy McDermott for argumentation class who, when I'd get started, would stop me. No, what is it you're trying to say?
Good for her.
Well, anyway, she was very effective at helping me see other modes of argumentative communication. And then plus, because I took a degree in speech there along with my English and journalism there, I got to take interp classes and persuasive classes and and just really got the whole breadth of the program there.
Did you immediately start teaching out of college?
Yeah. After I finished my student teaching, I got hired what was supposed to have been a temporary position at Turlock High School, but I negotiated with them that I needed a probationary position because there was a woman on pregnancy leave. They were also at the same time looking for someone either to ease out or to assist Jack Heald, who had been at Turlock High. And so I came in my first year and only had the advanced speech class, and he taught the beginning speech class. And then I argued with the principal that if they wanted me to continue on, I needed all of it. And so by the second year, I had all the speech classes, the speech classroom, everything. And things just picked up from there. And so I did that for 16 years there at Turlock High.
What else did you teach along with speech?
English.
Okay.
During that time period, I had the de facto honors English class for freshmen. It was called Advanced English Speech. And that's how I recruited kids into the speech program. You go to the junior high, tell them, if you sign up for that class, you'll get me. And because, as you know, once you develop a reputation as a good English teacher who, you know, the kids learn from and they advance from, pretty soon I was getting, you know, 2 and 3 sections of that English class because the parents wanted their kids in there. Even if they didn't want them to do speech, they wanted them in the English class. And so you get kids that way. And it worked out really well.
All right. Throughout this speech teaching career, you said it lasted 17 years? 16 years. Okay. What were you into? What kind of league offices did you hold? What about state or NFL? What, in addition to all these kids,
NFL
did
was,
you do?
I don't want to say minimal, but not as much.
Yeah, right.
I got to be chairman once, and I know if it was a 1 or 2 year term. I forget how that worked out. But I did it 1 year. I was a committee member probably half the time I was there. But because of the nature of the way we ran things, you were actively involved. The only thing you didn't get to do, not being a member, was go into the little room and they added up the results.
You remember that. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah. But other than that, it was no different than a league tournament. You had your responsibilities to run events and the whole bit. So it wasn't like going to invitationals where you sat outside and never knew what was going on.
Okay, were you league? I know you were, but I'll ask the question. You were league president.
I was league president. I was vice president. I was treasurer. I was involved with the league in almost every year in some way. I was a league rep. I was also for the district league rep at large.
Okay.
I did whatever, I'll be honest, I did whatever I could do to keep myself on the state speech council.
There you go. Now, I know at one time, maybe it was the end of your, toward the end of time, you had another job on the state speech council.
Tell us about it. I was actually the beginning.
Oh, that was your kickoff?
My first 5 years, I was the editor of the
Bulletin.
Bulletin.
Oh, the Bulletin, yeah.
And I had the minor in journalism from college and so forth, so it wasn't a stretch for me to do that. And it worked out that the gentleman who'd been doing it from Bakersfield High was looking for a way out. And I did that for 5 years.
Can you tell us anything interesting about your adventure in the Bulletin? Because that continues to be an adventure.
Well, it was an arduous event in those days because, one, it had to be typed. Luckily, my wife was a secretary, and the president at the time said we could pay her so much per page, which helped it get typed. That meant there, probably because of the nature of it, the typing, having to get a typewriter that had correcting elements, there probably were more errors in it than there would be today.
I don't know.
Well, at least the editing thing wasn't as simple as it was once the computers came around and stuff like that. Collecting articles and so forth, it probably wasn't for Larry Smith and a couple others. There probably would hardly be anything in the Bulletin. That's why I always enjoyed the fall one, because we had all the state
results. Right.
So the spring one was always thing. Also, the mailing of it became a class project, because the fall one went to every school in California at the time, where the spring one only went to members.
Yeah.
So I kind of got to know every school in the state.
Yeah, you would doing that.
You know, and learning how to set up mailings for the post office and their particular requirements for bulk mailing and those kinds of things. So it became kind of a little learning experience in many, many ways. I don't think some people realize the difficulty of getting it out.
It's one of the few positions on the league and state level I never attempted. And because I always saw you and the others struggling all the time, always begging, send me something, send me something.
Yeah.
Back to your kids, can you relate some of what you feel would be some of the major successes that you had with these kids and what it was all about?
Well, I think on the real level what you teach was exposing kids to public speaking experiences.
Right.
From a coaching standpoint, along that level, if I could get 100 kids to at least try public speaking once, that was incredible. And so I took advantage of your little freshman events. Also, when the league would up events to 30, some invitationals were, as you know, they're the great carrot to get kids to consider forensics. Some of my top students, their first tournament was the Cal Poly tournament. And they were induced because we would take 40 on the overnight trip. As long as they were prepared in one event and had practiced with me sufficient times, they could go. And what I did with the English class is, the term in those days on the writing process was publication. So the first quarter, we wrote expositories. The second quarter, we wrote persuasives. And we had the publication aspect, which is they had to give the speech. Well, so every kid at least had 2 topics they could, if they wanted to. And I would get kids to go to that Cal Poly tournament. They'd go and go, this isn't too bad. Because you always convince kids that speech tournaments were easier than speaking in class. Smaller audience, no one knew you. You could come out and go, I was great, the judges just crap you.
Yeah.
You know, and so those things worked out pretty well that way. And that's how, and so anyway, that was the goal, was to give them the exposure. And so if a kid said he didn't like speech and had never gone, I usually took that student to task. If a student went and said it wasn't for them, okay, you got to respect that, because at least they tried it. But you know what? They never said anything negative about the event. They just said that public speaking wasn't something they wanted to get involved in.
Can you recall for us one, 2 of the kids who were what you would consider the superstars?
Well, I had the state debate champions that one year.
And they were?
John Tooman and Curtis Merez.
And where did they end up?
John Tooman is head of Latin Studies at University of Nevada, Las Vegas.
Okay.
Curtis teaches ethnic studies at the UC San Diego.
He's
a published author.
Wasn't Tooman at San Francisco State in forensics?
That's his brother.
That's the brother.
The
okay.
brother is, he was, by the way, a former high school speech student, just not mine.
Okay.
He graduated the year before I got to Turlock, but he's also running for the mayor of Oakland.
Yeah, I knew that, but yes, okay. But he wasn't your student.
Not mine, no.
Little brother was, okay.
Yeah. Now, the fact that his brother was at Berkeley, we had no trouble getting into the Berkeley tournaments.
Right.
Also, Holly Christopherson was a state champion for me in original prose poetry at Santa Clara back in, I think, about '84. And I just remember her a lot, because as you know, her speech was geared for speech tournaments, more than it was even geared for the public, because it was about attending a speech tournament. So she just, as we like to say, she walked right through state. She was getting 1s in almost every round, and she'd get 5-1, you know. She just pretty much wiped everyone out in that event. Well, she's gone on to become a major Peace Corps person for 5 to 6 years. She worked for Salvation Army for 15 to 20 years, working in Africa. I'm not sure what she's doing now, but she was easy to Google, you know.
Right.
You know. And then, a little minor note, the current principal at Turlock High School competed for me for a year. The current speech coach at Turlock High School, and I'm excited because programs don't exist in some schools, and at least Turlock High has kept the program.
Michelle was a student of yours?
Yes, and her sister was Manda McDonald, who was my big thematic interp person for years. You know, she was auto-qualified twice.
I remember the name.
Manda, yeah. And she would do those interesting thematic interps and stuff. But her sister Michelle was the... anyway, I had her in class.
I hear a lot of good things about Michelle as
Mrs.
a
V,
coach.
they call her, because her name is so long.
So long, yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's others, but I guess, you know, you only have like...
okay.
Tim Amorine, who I had to nationals twice, is the chair of performing arts at York University in New York.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of them out there doing a lot of neat things.
You know, the lawyers and the doctors, everybody
sure.
has those, you know.
Well, okay, these kids you talk about, they were at state and at nationals. Can you recall for us any memories or memento from either a state or national or both, some point of interest at one of these tournaments? I know you got them, but whether you want to tell us, I don't know.
The state tournament to me was always the most difficult to have what you call a lot of memories because, well, actually when I got to take 2 cars instead of 1 to state, that was pretty darn exciting. However, that just increases your supervision requirements. Mm-hmm. And then when you're working the state tournament, you don't have a lot of time with your students. If there's a drawback to being involved,
that's it.
Yeah, because they need you a little bit sometimes, you know, because it's not like league where the scores are posted, you know, and stuff like that. But we would look for special places to go to dinner.
Yeah.
And so maybe at San Diego State where they have that, or in San Diego they have this place called the Diner in the Washington District or so, and it's a kind of a cool place where they play 50s tunes and stuff. We would look for special places to eat.
A lot of people say that.
Or when we were at the tournament in downtown Los Angeles, we had very few of those. The one at LA Valley College or something like that. Cal State LA, you know.
We were at Cal State LA, yes.
Is that where it was?
Anyway, I don't know what you're thinking about, but we were at Cal State LA.
Downtown, but we ran into the Chicago Cubs in the hotel.
You're tracking my memory now, but yes, now, yes.
That would be
Don't
89?
I don't know,
Somewhere
but
there.
whatever.
No, 80, not 89. 80, yeah, right, 89. Because that would be Michelle McGill, Karina York, those guys. Well, anyway, that was cool because we actually went to an LA Dodgers Cardinals game. You know, and
Sure.
and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of what you did away from speech sometimes, but with them as students, that was kind of fun.
How good are you, this kind of off on the side, of remembering all these kids, and you were just a minute rattling them off and placing them by year. Can you go through your list and
Not real well. The reason
because I can't.
the reason I can remember some of them is that they gave me senior photos.
Right.
And they used to be on my back wall in my classroom. Mm-hmm. And when I'd introduce up right to my last thing, the last assignment for my AP English Lit class was a speech.
Yeah.
And they had to do a 5 to 8 minute speech of their own choosing because that made it easier for them. They were allowed to use notes because that mirrored kind of what they do when they get to college, mm-hmm. those speech classes there. And that's how I geared it, pre-college speech assignment. I would tell them about all these kids, and I'd tell them stories about them. And what the thing is, a lot of them have been very successful, you know, like the ones on Broadway, the ones that are doctors, the whole bit. And they're going, oh man, you know. And I go, but what do they share with you? And I go, you're all from Turlock. They were here too. Oh, okay. Anyway, I remember one time at Nationals, though, Ken Adair and I were in Nashville, and we actually went to the Heritage Hotel and saw Al Gore pull out of the presidential race and hand it over to Michael Dukakis.
Well, that's an interesting memory. Yes.
Yeah, you know.
Absolutely.
And then also getting the NFL flu in Seattle, my first Nationals.
A lot of people got that.
And,
I avoided it, but a lot of them got it.
And then Tim Amorine, who I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, I only had one, he didn't play, so we had Saturday or Friday off, as you might say. So we went hiking at Rocky Mountain National Park when it was at Colorado School of Mines. And he also qualified when we were at Glenbrook South in Chicago. And we decided to take a road trip and basically toured Indiana. We visited Notre Dame, Indianapolis Speedway, Indiana University, Purdue, all in one day.
Busy day.
Yeah.
Busy day. Along the way, while you were when you were learning, and then as you were growing with the kids, what about some coaches that were of assistance? Some mentors?
Obviously, all the coaches in the YFL.
Okay.
But especially you, because you were guys who were the mentors.
The oldies.
Well, and we had a whole slew or a lot.
There
of
were
new people.
A lot of yes.
Myself. Rodney Owens at Modesto High at the time, he was kind of new. Pam had been in it only for a year or so. Tom had just been there a year or so. There was a lot of new people. And so it was a case of listening. And so you and Donovan. And I don't know if it was more coaching the events or learning how to handle students when you had issues. And what to, because classroom management, even for younger teachers today, is the thing that gets them not retained more than academic ability. And so, learning those things about...
Well, that helps you last.
Yeah. In terms of just pure Debbie Simon on how to do events, I would even when she left to go back to Massachusetts, I'd follow her around at Nationals and watch her judge, and then she'd explain to me what she liked and didn't like. Because interp, that was...
Well, of course.
That was what... If I had a weakness when I started teaching... It was in the interp areas.
Okay, mine was interp at the beginning, and it was still interp at the end 40 years later.
And then when you got out of our area, my first district tournament, I got to work with, Jones from Fresno High, and he taught me how to schedule. And from then on, it just I found my home. I felt known as like someone who could schedule really well. And actually, I took that with me away from speech. I ended up scheduling all of the competitive speech leagues from Merced up through Lodi, the whole District 8, for 10 years. I scheduled State Cup, which was all of Northern California, 600-team soccer tournaments. And just the mental ability of seeing all the variables started with, I guess maybe I just liked that logic. And then, Larry Smith and Richard Beers, those guys. Just working with them at the state level and at district, They brought a different perspective because they didn't see you every other week.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, pulling this all together, what do you feel is your greatest contribution?
Probably something I referred to earlier. exposing as many students as possible
Good, I hoped you'd say that.
to public speaking. Not that they necessarily competed, but that they learned that, well, I always use that old Book of Lists line. You know, the Book of Lists said there was 3 things people feared.
Yeah.
Getting cancer was third. No, dying was third. Getting cancer was second, and public speaking was number 1. So people would rather die or get cancer than give a speech. And then I tried to sell them on the idea that if, especially with English students, if you like the written word, you've got 80% of it done. The physical part's only 20% of the process. And it's like any sport. It's repetitive memory. You get up here and do it enough times, it becomes very comfortable, and you get used to it. And you find out that everyone's nervous. I said, you know, like right now, there's a little bit of nerves, but that nerves, you turn it into that energy. You know, you keep yourself from being monotone, you know, whatever the case is. You know. Anyway, that's what I thought my greatest, because that's why all the way through, I always required public speaking activities. Even to the point where I would teach them how to use a PowerPoint correctly, or whatever the case was, even when I wasn't doing, and I tried to come up with ways to create, even when I had the lowest level English class, we would take a rock album, like Simon and Garfunkel, and we would interpret the poetry, and then they'd have to bring in a song that they liked and showed why they liked it. Even though it was simple, they actually had to get up in front of a room and do simple public speaking assignments.
Good for you. Good for you. All right. So much for you and your individual activity. What about speech in general? What kind of changes do you feel happened from the beginning of your career to the end, and what you know of even up to now?
Well, they brought in Lincoln Douglas.
Okay. How has it evolved?
I thought that was a great event. I think policy debate was getting almost where you had to give up your life in order to be a top-level policy debater. I'm excited about parliamentary debate.
Do you like that?
I have enjoyed, I got to judge it at some tournaments that you hosted, and then when they had them at Turlock. I like that event. It's an event I can sell. It's an event I could make students, I would not have problems making students do it.
Okay.
Because they don't have to give up their life, and they can rise to a very high level. I don't think they would hit a frustration level with Lincoln Douglas, but especially with parliamentary debate. I know Turlock High's had a lot of success with it. Actually, the reason I think the speech program stays there is that the Trevethan, the guy who competes well for them, was the principal's son.
That helps.
Now she's a district administrator for curriculum.
Oh, yes. Can't beat that.
But she was my buddy. Right when I gave up speech, she recruited me to come over by her classroom, and we ate lunch together for years before she became administrator. Anyway, also I think they brought in more interp events. I thought when we moved Congress out of a twice-a-year event to every tournament event, I think created more opportunities for students. I think it made Congress a real event and not just something we do.
Do you realize that in most all leagues in the state of California, it's still twice a year? When I tell people how we used to do it, they can't believe that they did Congress so often.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was a good idea too.
If nothing else, you could at least get the interp kids to try something other during the non,
Right.
so they're not sitting around.
Right.
I think maybe that's what YFL was good at, was ability to experiment. We were doing duo interp before there ever was a state event. I liked it because it developed a relationship with the drama program. And I will admit that I would just save slots and they would provide the people.
Mm-hmm.
But a positive relationship where you can get other speakers wasn't a bad thing. I just liked that parliamentary debate. I tried to get, when we still had a little bit of a speech program at Pittman, I downloaded all the rules, the events. I took them to the woman. I said, "You got to try this." And she did speech a little bit. They gerrymandered it at Pittman to where it became an FFA class. And this way, as long as kids are taking an FFA class, they're an FFA, so they could take speech, and it still had its UC acceptance, because she taught it according to the syllabus. There we go. The UC accepted syllabus. And she did a lot of things with these kids, but they just didn't do the tournaments. They would do the club speeches, and that's about it.
What do you see? I know you've been away from it for a while, but what do you see, or maybe even like to see as the future of speech in California.
My greatest concern, and I guess maybe you can answer, is that I wonder how they fund it.
It's tough, and those invitationals you talk about, it's hard to get to go, especially to take that busload of 40 you mentioned.
Well, I just know what buses cost for a simple field trip.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how they would do buses today. That's why I'm amazed that Turlock still has the program, because if they take buses to these league tournaments, that's a lot of money in today's market. And so I'm guessing in cities like Modesto, where they can, there's enough high schools, you could practically have your own little league, and they don't have to pay for travel, and they could just get there. That's a really neat deal. I guess that's my greatest concern. Also, I wonder, and maybe it's different now because there's fewer events. I didn't do a great job of balancing my family's needs with my coaching. I just really got into coaching. And I was gone so much that all of a sudden there was this family need, and that was the reason I got out.
Still losing lots of young coaches that way.
But yet I know that there were coaches, that had families. In fact, because their kids ended up competing or whatever. But, or you heard about them, that they must have worked it somehow. And I just couldn't find, I didn't do it right, at least for that purpose. I also wonder that when I was going through, speech was always more girls than guys anyway.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah. But there were not all of the things now even for girls to do. Club soccer, that stuff had not quite picked up. It was just sort of happening at the tail end of my coaching. Now there are just so many things pulling kids away to do with their families that I mean, in my program, I couldn't require kids to go to every event because it just wasn't going to happen. So I would ask them, like the top kids, pick one tournament you're all going to go to. And that's when win sweepstakes. They'd all pick one tournament, because otherwise that would be the only time you could do it. I don't know how kids find time to do it today. I guess they make a commitment that they're going to do speech and they're not going to do those other things. But they're just, and now with the community service requirements the schools are throwing in and stuff like that. And I guess because speech is still a great resume item, some kids find it as their niche, and they do that.
Okay. To conclude, I'm going to give you a chance, because a few minutes ago, when I said something like you thought I was finished, you gave me a frown as if to say, but I didn't get to cover everything. This is your niche now. Anything that we didn't talk about that you think is important about you, your speech work, the philosophy of forensics education in general? What else would you like to share with somebody that might be watching this someday?
I think forensics is a great activity. I hope that there are still people committed to finding a way to get students an opportunity to speak beyond what they do in the classroom. I'm not sure how all that's going to work out. Maybe we'll luck out someday and we'll have, somebody from speech will have created the next Google or something, and they'll take millions of dollars and donate it to forensics programs, and we'll all be able to do what we need to do to get kids to go to activities and stuff like that. But I think I pretty much got everything in there. I want people to be able to have the speech experience. I think that every teacher should probably, it's a state standard. You would hope that
being ignored,
more and more teachers would do it. I will like to say that my daughter, who's a 6th grade teacher, is teaching. They have these little mini units. She teaches speech as her mini unit.
Good for her.
The fact that she was a Ron Underwood student might have helped.
Good for her.
She's actually looking for materials, and she's, the CHSSA website only.
Now, have you made any guest appearances in her classroom?
I'm good judging the impromptu assignments.
Oh, okay.
But she knows so much already, and it's a short class.
Right. So. Very good. Thank you so much, David Jack, CHSSA Hall of Fame class of 1994.